What is up, guys? You seem to really enjoy the 10 awesome old skins video I did last week, and I love looking back at like leagues past stuff, so I've got another cool idea today too. These are all picks that actually used to be broken or overpowered seasons ago. Now a lot of these builds don't actually exist anymore, or the champions just aren't as strong. So like this video if you did, dislike it if you don't, let me know what you remember being busted back then, and leave any ideas for videos like this that you want to see. Now sadly I can't really use footage from seasons and seasons ago because of copyright stuff, but you'll get the idea, and I've left the most broken, overpowered one until the very end, so make sure you stay for that. Jungle ALISTAR is first up. There was a time when Ali was the most feared ganking jungler in the game. Some of you actually might remember these days of living in fear, but it's the same idea as a roaming support ALISTAR now. He'd walk into lane, combo you, and it'd be enough with the damage from the laner to send you packing. The patch in April 2011 reworked ALISTAR. That is 5 years ago, by the way. Most notably, it added the trample passive damage, which he didn't have before. The biggest addition was that it dealt double damage to monsters. This actually meant that his clear speed was pretty good. He did good damage with his abilities, and you could just run around with Moby boots and gank the crap out of everyone. Sadly, he did slowly get nerfed a ton over time. Every other patch will be hitting some part of his kit. It started with his overall damage, then it moved to reducing the headbutt range to make his ganking harder, and finally in 5.12 we saw the trample double damage to monsters removed, and that kind of marked the end of Jungle ALISTAR. Now next up is definitely one of the most broken things that ever happened to the game, the reworked Black Cleaver back in the first patch of pre-season in Season 3. Talon was the main champion to benefit from it, basically running around and one-shotting everybody. It was changed to have a flat 15 armor pen, and the passive stacked up to 4 times to reduce their armor by a total of 30% at max stacks. Now that already seems pretty strong, right? 30% armor reduction plus flat armor pen, and well it was, but it also stacked. The passives weren't unique. You could buy multiple Black Cleavers and all of the armor pen would stack on top of each other, basically meaning anyone you hit had no armor at all. Talon still had a silence back in those days on his E, the cutthroat jump, so there was next to nothing you could do. You just had to stand there silence and watch as your health bar disappeared. Your E, Q, W combo would apply all 4 stacks of the Black Cleaver instantly, and let me tell you, that is the only time I've ever stopped playing the game because it was ridiculous. GALIO is considered pretty crap right now, but in Season 2 he was really overpowered. Back in the day, AP mid laners were basically all you had. Holy crap, that made me sound so old. Okay, let's try that again. In Season 2 we only really saw AP mid laners apart from the odd exception. Zed wasn't even released yet, and Talon wasn't considered to be that strong. This instantly made GALIO a solid choice, but it was also the triple gold per 10 meta. I did mention this in another video, but Heart of Gold, Cage's Lucky Pick, and Philosopher's Stone were 3 gold per 10 items you could buy on any champion. GALIO literally went through a phase of buying all 3 of these, sitting on them generating gold until we had just 6 items way quicker than everyone else in the game. His base damage was the main thing that let him do this. Like, he gained a few useful stats from the items, but he had naturally good wave clear, good poke, a big ticket ultimate that meant he could afford to sit back and wait for longer. His shield was also one of the only things like that at the time. The sustain was off the charts to the point where you could actually use it on yourself. You could walk up to a tower and the tower shots would actually heal you. Now, Irelia even had a meme attached to her for how strong she was, or at least how much Riot seemed to hate Irelia and kept nerfing her as soon as she started to do really well. To give you an idea, okay, she was added into the game in November 2010, one of the oldest champions. She was buffed a few patches later, but from then on, the changes were almost always nerfs or tweaks. This is where the better nerf Irelia meme actually came from. Like, a lot of you new players won't even know what I'm talking about, but some of the older ones will definitely remember this. And yet the dumbest thing is, even after all of the constant nerfs and stuff, she was still top tier for a really long time. There weren't as many carry brews or top lanes in earlier seasons, and Irelia was considered a champion that in the right hands could actually beat almost any matchup. Her mobility was like nothing we'd ever seen before. The outplay potential with her stun and Q jumping around, even the sustain from her W made her seriously hard to deal with. Irelia was consistently considered overpowered for a lot of Season 1, 2, and 3 before newer champions came out and those nerfs finally caught up with her. So going from overpowered to what I consider completely broken, AP Rengar one-shot, boys. I'm not sure if Voyboy actually invented this or not, but his stream was one of the first places to make this famous. In September 2012, his W was changed to have no cast time now and could be used while moving. That was kind of the start of AP Rengar. They slowly gutted this version of Rengar, though a few months later the base damage on his W was reduced, then the healing changed to a scaling amount and not just 10%, then the damage again was changed to scaling with level. The problem with AP Rengar was that it genuinely could have one-shot you with a couple uses of his W, healing for an absolutely crazy amount as well. He'd jump around spamming it constantly and it was so hard to deal with. Not only was it just really overpowered, but it was really broken, and Riot sadly decided it wasn't kind of in line with the whole assassin lion thing that kills you with his claws, or as Rengar was supposed to be, so they made sure you needed to play him AD. So my boy YORICK is up next. He used to be my go-to top laner when I was forced to play it, just because seriously anyone could play this guy and win. He was that easy and that strong. It's funny really, he was literally one of the most bugged champions ever up until probably Azir. There was a time where he'd permanently reanimate, so when you died with your ult on, you just come back to life over and over and keep killing everyone. Once they realized how oppressive he was and how little counterplay he had, with everyone as well crying about how boring it was to play against him, they just nerfed him over and over until the point he is now. The problem used to be he spammed ghouls all day and pushed. He kept you under tower, poked you, and then in team fights his ult is AD carry and tear through your team. It was not a fun experience to be playing against him. Now this is one you probably expected. KASSAWIN used to be so overpowered. Nicknamed KASSAWIN in the Season 3 World Championship patch, Riot made a few major changes just before that really tipped him over the edge. In patch 3.13 they reduced his Q damage slightly, but they increased the silence duration at rank 1 to 1.5 seconds. At rank 5, by the way, that was a 2.5 second silence. It's been a while since they removed the silence, but yeah, he actually used to have a targeted ranged silence that meant he could jump on you, beat you, and you couldn't even hit him back because you're silenced. The other thing that was kind of funny actually was the Rift Walk. So it used to work on a stacking mechanic, so the more you used it, the more mana it cost, but the more damage you do. That patch, they actually massively increased the base damage and stacking damage, so what people started doing was stacking it up on the fountain in base, then using TP near a fight, running in, Rift Walking onto someone, and because they had it stacked so much already, it would literally one-shot people. Now Riven is actually similar to KASSAWIN in a way, similar to Irelia, once considered one of the most overpowered champions in the game. She has definitely fallen from grace in Season 6 and is no longer the queen of top lane. Unlike Irelia, she actually went for the longest time without really being touched balance wise. Like in Seasons 3 and 4 she received only minor changes, and it wasn't until patch 5.9 midway through Season 5 last year that she started to get hit with repeated nerfs. We used to see a ton of Riven mains everywhere. She was probably the most common top lane pick for a long time, and I'm sure a lot of people can remember the toxic name tag that Riven mains got. Riven was a super snowbally hard carry champion, which meant that when she was ahead she could dominate, but when behind there wasn't really much she could do. This led to a lot of Riven mains just giving up, being frustrated when behind and flaming because they felt like they couldn't do anything. See, there actually is some logic to some Riven mains being dickheads. Who would have thought? As if she wasn't played enough already, Faker actually played her in the World Championships as a mid lane counter pick to Zed. Of course he completely wrecked those games, and for the next few months solo queue was filled with even more Riven players. Now I couldn't really include AP Rengar and leave out his brother from another mother, AP TRYNDAMERE. Funnily enough, Voyboy again was the guy who made this kind of popular in Season 3. Oddly enough though, Riot didn't seem to mind this unique way of playing one of League's oldest champions, and is one weird build you could actually still play today. If you saw my Earth video with AP Trynd, it works in exactly the same way. You have a crazy spin amount of damage and a really strong heal. Obviously in Earth you can spin all the time, and that is why it works now, whereas in actual games we can't really do that. Saying that though, your spin cooldown is quite low anyway. It has a 1:1 ratio, which is very high for an ability, and your heal is even better with a 1.2 ratio. It was honestly one of the most obnoxious picks in the game. You heal for crazy amounts so you can't really kill you, burst people down and spin all over the place. The spinning was the main source of damage. Not only did it have that low cooldown, but if you had full rage and you managed to crit, the cooldown was instantly reduced by 2 seconds. So for the most broken one, we have to go all the way back to July 2010, very start of Season 1. ZHAO, or as he was better known back then, win now, was the most broken champion on release. His numbers were crazy. He had a really good scaling and you had an insane slow and utility. Back in season 1, these things were not usual. You didn't have everything rolled into one package, but that is exactly what this guy was. After 2 weeks of hell for everyone but the person playing Xin Zhao, Riot hit his kit really heavily and brought him back down a level. Actually, if you think about it now, right, if you have like a sated Rage Blade Xin Zhao, he'd charge and 3-shot you. That's kind of how he used to be, but just permanently, and nobody had an answer to him back then either. In that patch that nerfed him, his ultimate damage was taken down in 2 ways. His charge slow was reduced, the duration reduced, the area affected reduced, and even his attack speed stats, base and per level, were both lowered. That is a lot of things to be nerfed in one patch, but he definitely needed it. We didn't really see him a ton in other seasons until heavy attack speed builds came up, like Feral Flare or Devourer, which swiftly shot him back into the OP range and got him or the item nerfed again. So there you go, look back at some of the most broken champions or builds that aren't around in the game anymore. Remember to like, subscribe, comment, share, but for now, let's go to the robots.